I want you to picture a scene with me. A scene that feels like it's straight out of a history book, but at the same time feels deeply, deeply wrong.
So just imagine, it's London, 1848. Queen Victoria, the most powerful woman in the world, is on her knees in the pouring rain. Standing over her is a triumphant governor from the Chinese Empire. Her husband, Prince Albert, is about to be shipped off to Beijing as a political prisoner. Out on the River Thames, a massive Chinese fleet sits at anchor, having totally crushed the Royal Navy.
But here's the thing. That entire scene, it's pure fiction. It never happened. In fact, the reality of 1848 was the complete opposite. Prince Albert stayed right where he was. Instead, after British troops sacked the Chinese emperor's palace, they gave Queen Victoria a little Pekingese dog they nicknamed Lootie. Yeah, as in loot from the war. And it wasn't a Chinese fleet dominating the Thames. It was Britain's brand new steam-powered warships that had just smashed their way up the Yangtze River, forcing China into a humiliating defeat. So this crazy, dramatic gap between what could have been and what actually was, well, it forces us to ask one of the biggest questions in all of history. Let's just put it out there, plain and simple. Why did the world turn out the way it did for the last couple of centuries? Why was it Western powers that expanded across the globe and not the other way around? That is the giant mystery we are going to try and solve today. Now, you've probably heard the simple textbook answer, right? It was the Industrial Revolution. The West just developed all this game-changing tech, steam engines, factories, and guns, lots of guns. As one poet famously put it, whatever happens, we have got the Maxim gun, and they have not. But hold on, that answer just kind of pushes the real question one step down the road, doesn't it? Okay, great, the West had the Industrial Revolution, but why? Why there? Why then? That's the real puzzle we need to get to the bottom of. For hundreds of years, people have been arguing over two main answers to that question. And according to the historian Ian Morris, whose incredible work we're digging into, both of those answers are just plain wrong. So on one side, you have what he calls the long-term lock-in theories. These basically say the whole game was rigged from the very beginning, that because of things that happened thousands of years ago, the West was always destined to win. And on the other side, you've got the short-term accident theories. These argue that it's all just a recent fluke, that the West basically just got lucky and won the historical lottery sometime around 1800. Morris comes along and says, nope, you're both missing the point. Why? Because both sides are suffering from a kind of historical tunnel vision. One group is staring way back at the ancient past, and the other is zoomed in way too close on the recent past. To see what really happened, you have to zoom out and look at the whole massive shape of history. And to do that, you can't just rely on the old ways of thinking. We need a new set of tools, a totally different, more objective way to read the story of our past. And the most important tool Morris gives us is this idea he calls social development. Now, this is absolutely crucial. This is not a moral judgment. It's not about saying which society was better or smarter or more civilized. It's simply a neutral way to measure a society's ability to get stuff done. That's it. To shape the world around it to meet its own goals. And this isn't some vague, fluffy concept. He actually measures it using 4 very concrete things. 1, how much energy a society can capture, from food, fuel, all that. 2, how big its cities are, which tells you a lot about how organized it is. 3, its ability to make war and project power. And 4, its information tech, how well it can record and share ideas. By tracking these 4 numbers over time, you can literally draw a graph of human history. So with that metric in our back pocket, we can analyze history using 3 simple ideas. First, biology. At the end of the day, we're all just clever apes, and humans everywhere are fundamentally the same. Second, sociology. Morris has this great line that history is pushed forward by lazy, greedy, and frightened people who are always looking for easier, richer, and safer ways of doing things. But if biology and sociology are basically constant, what changes? That brings us to number 3, the most important piece of the puzzle, geography. And this, right here, this is the absolute game changer. This is the big aha moment of the whole theory. Geography, it turns out, isn't a fixed thing. Its meaning, its importance, can completely flip over time. This next sentence is probably the single most important one for understanding this entire idea. Geography determines how social development unfolds, but social development determines what geography means. You see the feedback loop? It's brilliant. What was once a geographic dead end can suddenly become a superhighway. Just think about the Atlantic coast of Europe. For thousands of years, being there was a huge disadvantage. It was a total backwater, the literal edge of the known world, far away from all the action happening in the Mediterranean. But then, social development creates ships that can cross big oceans, and suddenly, that same location transforms into the most valuable piece of real estate on the entire planet. It becomes the launchpad to the Americas. So what happens when you actually run the numbers, when you graph out social development for both East and West? You get this. And it reveals a fact that just completely shatters that whole destiny argument. For over 1,200 years, from about 550 AD to 1775, the East was consistently more developed than the West. So what on earth happened? Well, around 1750, the meaning of geography flipped again. The Atlantic Ocean became the engine of a new kind of global economy, and the countries that were perfectly positioned to take advantage of it, like Britain, were able to just leapfrog past the East. So you see, it wasn't an accident, but it wasn't destiny either. It was just a predictable pattern of development changing what geography means. And all of this brings us right back to the title of Morse's book and the title of this explainer, Why the West Rules for Now. Because this framework isn't just about understanding the past. It gives us a really powerful set of tools for thinking about the future.
I mean, that same historical engine is humming away right now, today. The world's economic center of gravity, well, it's shifting again. This time, it's moving towards the Pacific. The very same patterns that allowed the West to rise are still in motion, and they're not frozen in time.
So you have to ask yourself the big, provocative, final question. If this engine of history, where our own development constantly redefines what geography is important, is still running, is there any logical reason to think that today's world order is permanent? Or does the deep underlying pattern of history tell us that another huge shift might just be around the corner? In the end, maybe the best way to think about all this comes from Winston Churchill. He once said, "The farther back you can look, the farther forward you are likely to see." And by understanding these massive, deep patterns of the past, we might just have the clearest lens possible for seeing where we're all headed next.